I think we have a real problem here for the Democrat Party. They're not enthusiastic. Their programming isn't enthusiastic. They're running on this socialist platform. I mean, they put out young stars like AOC. She's not even talking about Joe Biden. I mean, they have a real problem with their base. They have a real problem with their party, even though they're running further and further to the left. I mean, I don't know, Hogan, what was your take on it?
Same thing. I think the contradiction in messaging was a real problem for them. I mean, you have someone like John Kasich last night who was a complete failure, obviously running for president. He lied and said that he would support the nominee and didn't.
Right.
He also called Joe Biden a liar, so I guess they're both liars. But then they also said he tried to sell Joe Biden as a moderate. And then you had Bernie Sanders come on and say the radical agenda we've been talking about is now considered mainstream. We're bringing Joe Biden along with us. So which one is it? And then you also have this whole situation in which Bill Clinton spoke tonight as well. And in the middle of this Me Too movement, I mean, talk about the poster child for the Me Too movement is Bill Clinton. And so where are they? What are they trying to tell the American people? It's very clear they don't really have a message. It took them 2 hours to even mention Joe Biden last night. Tonight was just as boring. They did the whole nominating process and let everyone cast their votes across the country. So it was clunky at best. I mean, look, you got a hand tied behind your back because it isn't in person. But the American people are actually getting to see exactly what goes on at a convention, all the awkward things that happen that the TV never cuts to. They're always looking at TV panels and commentators. That's what you actually see at a convention, and people are getting to actually witness what you would see if you were in the hall, and it's very awkward and very odd.
Something you mentioned, you said AOC spoke. Now, if you blinked, you would have missed it, right? They gave her 60 seconds. Something I was surprised at is that her speaking time was to nominate Bernie Sanders to be the Democrat nominee for president. Sure. I was surprised. What are they trying to do there? Are they trying to, sort of fit a square peg in a round hole, saying, hey, we gave you your 60 seconds, you're nominating Bernie, but it's the Biden convention. How did that play to you guys?
I mean, look, I'm the daughter of 2 Cuban immigrants, and Bernie Sanders yesterday, you hit on this. He said that the ideas that I was running on are now the mainstream. The socialist ideas that Bernie Sanders running on that ruined Cuba, that ruined Venezuela, that's now the mainstream for the Democrat Party. That's concerning. It ruined country after country, and I can't imagine the American people are going to open their eyes, see that, and actually think, you know what, this is what I want to vote for.
Be more specific, though. Which policies? Is it the Green New Deal? Is it the regulating cow farts? What are we talking about that you think the Americans will really reject in terms of AOC?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything, right? If you're going to take away the control from the people and give it to the government, that's what fails. That's what we see fails. People, it's the government by and for the people. If you take that part out, now you're just having a bunch of people in Washington, D.C. telling people what to do, and no one's going to like that.
I completely agree. And look, AOC has her own issues and her own problems, no question. But let's not pretend as though they don't have a featured speaker coming up that is, by GovTrack, the most liberal senator of all, even further left than Bernie Sanders, and that is Kamala Harris. She is the vice presidential pick. So this entire move for Joe Biden to the left has been completed. At the beginning of this convention, you see just how far left they've decided to go. And it's the Green New Deal that would kill 10 million energy jobs just like that. Yes, it's defunding the police that would leave our communities rife with crime, chaotic, which is what the Democrat Party obviously wants. But it's also, as we're trying to come out of this time with COVID, we're trying to rebuild the economy. The president has put together a plan and has policies in place that, quite frankly, have given us 3 consecutive months of historic job growth. And Joe Biden wants to put on top of that a $4 trillion tax increase on top of the American people. And I just think back to the time that Hillary Clinton, who lost, ran on a $2 trillion tax increase.
Americans don't want
it. Yeah, he took one look at that and said, $2 trillion, hold my beer, and doubled it. You think the American people are going to want that when they're trying to come out of this time when they hadn't been able to work? They're just trying to get their jobs back. They're just trying to start to pay their rent. And now you're going to saddle 80% of the American people with more taxes? I just think it's a complete loser.
Something that happened today. The S&P 500 hit a record today, an all-time record. So what does that mean? That means that we were at a high in February. We went through a plague all the way down and a V-shaped rocket ship rebound. The president has been talking about it. And on that point, let's look at the contrast a little bit. Look at this completely disjointed mess of 2 nights. Boring, glitchy, let's be honest. Not glitzy, glitchy, right? a bunch of no names. Who knows what's going on? And then look at what the president has done over 2 days. Hogan, talk a little more about that.
Look, it's interesting. The president has been out across this country, and I think the Democrats and the media hate it when the president goes out and speaks.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want the president to speak, but they don't want Joe Biden to speak either, and it's for two very different reasons. They understand when Donald Trump gets out on the campaign trail and speaks directly to the American people without the filter of the mainstream media, it absolutely resonates. The forgotten men and women of this country realize that they have been forgotten no more for the last 4 years. They saw record-setting successes in record-setting time. And when you compare and contrast that with what the media want for Joe Biden, which is for him to stay down in that hidey hole, they don't want him to pop his head out because they know when he does, you hear crazy stories about children loving to rub on his leg hair, and Arizona's a great city, and all African Americans think alike. They know it's problematic.
Are you a junkie on cocaine?
Yeah, are you a cocaine? They know
Not
it's a
either.
problem. But if there's one thing we can say about the media, they protect their own, and they are just as radical, and they want a remaking of this country in the socialist image of other nations. And so they are counting on Biden to do that, so they're going to cover for him at every turn.
Ali, today stops for the president, Iowa for the natural disaster, and then over to Yuma in Arizona, talk about the border. What impression do those two events leave with you?
I mean, I think it kind of touches what you're saying. The president's out there in all different parts of this country
Right.
talking to voters, more importantly, listening to them. You know what? The Democrats are out of touch because they're not listening to voters. They're not talking to them. They're not hearing from them about the real solutions to the real problems that they're facing. I mean, how could they? Right? They want him to hide. They want him to hide from his record. So I think we saw the president today talking about Joe Biden's bad record on border security, on law and order.
Right.
We saw him yesterday talking about Joe Biden's bad record on the economy. You talked about the V-shaped recovery that we were mocked for. We said we were going to get a V-shaped recovery coming out of this pandemic, and people mocked us.
That's right.
And you know what? We saw with Joe Biden the most anemic, slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. So you see that contrast, and that's what people are voting on Election Day.
And I always like to point out the fact that in elections often we talk in abstracts where we say, if you elect me, I'll do this. I promise I'll take care of this for you guys. And in this race, you have two men where you don't have to guess what the economy would look like under Joe Biden. We saw it for 8 years. We saw 60,000 manufacturing plants closed. We saw his position on NAFTA, which was a horrible trade deal for the American worker, for the American middle class. 850,000 jobs gone, 3.2 million jobs gone from American workers directly to China because of Joe Biden. And when you look
WTO,
at what,
TPP.
of course, and when you look at what Donald Trump did, coming in and making the USMCA trade deal that actually protects American workers, 650,000 manufacturing jobs back into this country, more jobs than there were people to fill them. I mean, this is a record-setting economy for African American, Asian American, Hispanic American. Women had jobs like they'd never seen before. So I think when people start to hear that message and remember just what we were able to accomplish so quickly, this president's leadership is unquestioned, and elections are about choices, and the choice here is very clear.
No doubt. And we talked about manufacturing, talked about the Midwest. The president yesterday was in Wisconsin and he was in Minnesota. Do you remember this mess of a convention, this socialist meetup that the Democrats are attempting to have virtually was supposed to be in Wisconsin. So far, all Wisconsin's gotten is Tom Perez for a couple of seconds. And look at that contrast. The president is in Wisconsin and Minnesota on Monday. The vice president heads tomorrow to Wisconsin, again, to talk about manufacturing. Our leaders, the leaders of this campaign, the leaders of this country, are visiting the heartland, while what are the Democrats doing? Sitting around some school somewhere and hugging each other? What's going on? It's a total disaster. That contrast, I think, is very key.
And one thing we haven't touched on yet is energy, and I think that's extremely important. And the president's going to Pennsylvania on Thursday. And you know what? You're talking about the most liberal senator in the United States, I know, Kamala Harris, who wants a ban on fracking. This would cost hundreds and thousands of jobs in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. This would be devastating to their economies, and this is what they stand for. This is what they want.
And it's also a national security issue. When you have to rely on other countries for your energy, you're held hostage by the whims of countries in the Middle East, the whims of Russia and of China. Because we are a net exporter of energy for the first time in decades, it allows us to not be beholden to these other nations. That's so significant for our national security to protect the American people both at home and abroad. And this president did it with his open energy policies, and he'll continue that for 4 years if reelected.
Well, I think Beijing Biden wants us to be dependent on China. I mean, he's shown that throughout his whole career, right? Saying, oh, China's not a threat, forget about it. You're going to be fine. And then while China was robbing America blind. But, as we wrap up this first segment, I want to talk about a little bit about Bill Clinton. I think it's key, right? They sort of fit him into that first night. I don't know what they were doing with that. Hogan, you've got a history with Bill Clinton. You said Hillary Clinton was your first lady before she was our first lady.
That's right.
What was your impression of Bill Clinton tonight and his impact on this party?
Sure. Well, first of all, I did grow up in Arkansas, so I'm familiar with the way he governs. I'm familiar with the scandals that follow him around. And tonight was really kind of a culmination of a career that has, quite frankly, which has been tortured to some degree. And him trying to pretend as though he's the arbiter of how the Oval Office should be treated. I think he said something like it should be a command center, not a storm center. The last person in the world I'm taking a lecture from on how the Oval Office should be used is the person who abused the Oval Office the way he did, and that was Bill Clinton. So I think the American people got a chance to see tonight someone who is long since, his time is done. The party is now way further to the left than Bill Clinton ever thought about being. And so it was problematic for them on many levels, as I mentioned, too, with the Me Too movement that has followed him around for his whole life.
Where was Kristen Gillibrand, Claire McCaskill, Alyssa Milano, all these people who came out, appalled by the fact that Bill Clinton was in their party? Yet tonight, Joe Biden was highlighting him.
That's
so
exactly right.
are they going to come out against Joe Biden, too?
That's great.
One thing I noticed was that as Clinton was speaking, first of all, he looked terrible. Let's be honest, looked terrible. And you got to remember, Bill Clinton was president last 20 years ago, and here he still is, and he's 4 years younger than Joe Biden. So that's something to think about, okay?
That's probably true.
So,
that might have been the last candidate who actually went to Wisconsin on the Democratic ticket, too.
Maybe. But one thing I noticed in the shot was there was nothing with the word Biden on it as Clinton was speaking. It was just his home in Chappaqua. I don't know what that was all about.
Well, look, if we know anything about Bill Clinton, it's never about anybody else. It's usually about Bill Clinton. So,
I love that.
There's that.
All right. We'll be right back with Senior Advisor Steve Cortez. Don't go anywhere. This is The Real Joe Biden. And don't forget to text 88022 to get involved and hear directly from the campaign. Thanks so much. Stay right there. Welcome back. This is The Real Joe Biden. I'm Boris Epstein, Strategic Advisor to Trump 2020, with Ali Pardo, Deputy Communications Director for Press, Trump 2020, and back again, by popular demand, Steve Cortez, Senior Advisor to Trump 2020. Before we go any further, again, text Trump to 88022 to interact with the campaign directly. Hear from us. It's very important. Text Trump 88022. All right, let's talk about something very important. Let's talk about the globalism that was on display tonight. Let's talk about John Kerry and the pallets of cash that he had sent to Iran on behalf of Joe Biden and Barack Obama. Let's talk about Colin Powell, the architect of the Iraq war. Let's talk about the terrible policies that Biden's been signing on to for years. What'd you think?
You know, look, if I were to use a movie analogy, my favorite of all the Star Wars movies was The Empire Strikes Back. This was The Globalist Strikes Back, okay, tonight, because it literally was, it was almost a reunion of all of the architects of the miserable interventionist endless war policies that were engaged in before this president by several administrations, before Trump came in with America First foreign policy of realism and restraint. It was like a reunion of the architects of the Iraq War. I mean, it really was. I mean, for them to trot out John Kerry, Colin Powell, Bill Clinton. These are the people.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Bill.
Yeah, so these are the people.
Segment.
And with Bill, it's not so much war as terrible trade deals. But the point is, they go hand in hand, right? The same people who love to send American troops to fight all over the world also love to send American jobs all over the world. And that's what the Washington foreign policy establishment did. That's what the permanent political class did for decades in this country. It's the reason that the America First nationalist populist movement happened and Donald Trump won. And they literally staged a bit of a reunion tonight for the American people.
Allie, John Kerry, again, the architect, one of the key people of the terrible Iran deal, jeopardized American national security, jeopardized our greatest ally, Israel, in an existential way, and also the 2004 loser for the Democrats. So what did he bring to the Democrats tonight?
I mean, I don't know. When I see the people that they're rolling out, what it reminds me of is not only the foreign policy that we saw in the Middle East, but also in the Southern Hemisphere.
Sure.
This continued failure to be a strong leader, the strong leadership that got us these good trade deals, the strong leadership that got us a Middle East peace deal, in the peace in the Middle East just last week. I mean, they lacked that today on that stage. They were weak. They reminded me of that same lack of strength that led us to countries taking advantage of us and kind of just being in the forefront and in the leadership in the world instead of us being the ones who are on top and always leading on the stage.
I think that's exactly right. You know, their policy, instead of being America First, was really America everywhere as far as fighting, right? And not just in terms of the terrible costs that we played, the terrible human costs that America paid by being involved in these endless wars, but also the financial costs, right? Donald Trump said, no, number one, we're not going to engage in constant endless war. We're not going to engage in nation building. Number two, other countries, particularly wealthy countries who are supposedly our allies, are going to pay their fair share. NATO, particularly European allies, you are going to step up. So he prioritized America. And then on the trade front, you're exactly right, Allie. For whatever reason, America has always, if this were a poker game, okay, America always had a straight flush, but we acted like we had a pair of sevens when it came to negotiating in international trade. And Donald Trump said, we are going to act like America. The entire world wants access to our markets, so we're not going to be an abuser in trade, but we are going to demand fairness and reciprocity. This was the crowd tonight that sold out American workers to globalist interests. That is what Joe Biden would go back to if, God forbid, he could somehow, some way win the presidency.
And we actually saw Joe Biden a little tonight. I mean, what did you take from that? Did he seem to have it together? Not to me. I thought a little bit they must have been really nervous for those couple of seconds when he accepted the nomination. Those must have been tense moments over there in Camp Biden, right, Allie?
Here's one thing that you touched on before we get into the complete lack of enthusiasm around Joe Biden as a whole. You touched on the military and the fact that they were willing to send our military overseas, but they didn't have the backs of our military here at home.
No,
they weren't providing them the funding. They weren't providing them the things they need. I come from a military family. We saw it firsthand. This president has brought back the support for the military families. He's brought back the support for our troops monetarily and the support that they need once they're out of the military through the VA. So I think that's an extremely important point because you know what? They're willing to send them over there, but they weren't willing to have their backs.
That's a great point. It's the worst of all worlds, saying we're going to send you everywhere to fight, but not back you with the funding, the support, the equipment that you need. And this president is the exact opposite. This president has been so restrained about foreign policy and has been extremely non-interventionist in the world, but has built up the military in every way necessary through equipment, through care for those who need it, whether it's physical injuries or the invisible injuries that so many people sustain from these wars. And Boris, to your point about Joe Biden, the roll call of the stage was such a snooze that if Joe Biden, if he wasn't asleep already at the beginning, he certainly fell asleep during the roll call of the stage. I will listen. I don't want to only rag on this show tonight. I have to say they did play Kool in the Gang. Okay, I'm going to give them some props for playing Kool in the Gang when the sort of balloon drop, the fake balloon drop happened.
We talked about this a little bit in the first segment. AOC got her 60 seconds of fame. I mean, it was almost pathetic how little time they gave her. Try to just be able to say, hey, check the box. AOC was here nominating Bernie Sanders. But nevertheless, it's her policies now that drive the Democrat Party. Isn't that right?
Yeah. So, Boris, look, they may not have given her a lot of time tonight, but when you look at the platform,
Right.
they have given her and her cohorts an enormous amount of influence. Let's face it, the squad is really the driving philosophical animus of the Democratic Party right now. And I shouldn't call them the squad because I think they like that name. I prefer to call them the Socialist Spice Girls because that's really who they are. But as crazy as their ideas are, I think you're hitting on an important point here. Let's face it, they are in many ways sort of the internal think tank of the 2020 Democratic
No
Party.
doubt.
This is not your parents' or your grandparents' Democratic Party. This is not the party of workers. It's not the party of people of faith. It's not the party of people who want to own firearms and exercise their constitutional rights. This is a radical party. It's a fusion of leftist radicals and then globalist corporatists. And that's the worst possible fusion we could think of for America.
You mentioned not the party of family. I mean, how far to the left have they gone? They've gone on being pro-choice. I mean, forget first trimester, second trimester. And this is now the party of abortion at any time. Is that right?
I mean, they went from being pro-choice to being pro-abortion.
Right.
And that's what's concerning to me is like they've just gone so far out there that they're even talking about it aggressively, like in a term, like if it's okay. And I think the reality is our party, this president, is the party of life, the party of values. He's put 200 strong conservative judges on the bench. He's going to continue to show those values, to share those values with the American people. But look, this is something I said in the first segment. If you're not out there talking to the American people, you're not hearing back from them, how are you possibly going to represent their values, represent their thoughts, and represent their ideals?
As we wrap up the segment, what are you looking forward to tomorrow? I mean,
Right.
you've got crooked Hillary Clinton, and then you've got the one and only, the farthest to the left senator in the U.S. Senate, Kamala Harris. What are you looking forward to?
And exactly, Kamala Harris, I'm glad you mentioned that because also that's not just our subjective opinion.
No.
If you look at GovTrack, which is a data-driven model, they determined, based on her voting record 2019, the most liberal senator, even to the left of Bernie Sanders. We're going to make sure the American people know all about that record.
All right, we'll be right back. Don't forget, text Trump to 88022, and we're going to be back with so much more of the real Joe Biden. And we're back. This is The Real Joe Biden. I'm Boris Epstein, strategic advisor with Trump 2020. Ali Pardo is back, deputy communications director for press, Trump 2020, and our senior advisor, Steve Cortez. Before we talk about President Obama speaking tomorrow, I want to remind everybody to text Trump to 88022 to interact directly with the campaign. Nobody can cut you off. You want to hear from us, want to hear about events, text Trump to 88022. So, tomorrow, Wednesday, the big speaker at night will be Kamala Harris. But before her will be former President Barack Obama, who took a long time to endorse sleepy Joe Biden, a real long time. And the stories are coming out now that the two didn't really get along, that Obama may think that Biden's a little bit of a buffoon, let's be honest, okay? But that's tomorrow. And that's sort of the nitty-gritty inside baseball people care about in D.C., right? Who likes who, who's going to what restaurant, that kind of stuff. But what matters to the American people at home are policies and results. Barack Obama and Joe Biden oversaw the worst recovery from a recession pretty much in this country's history. Let's contrast that to this rocket ship recovery we're experiencing right now with the S&P 500 hitting a record today. Talk about that.
No, it's fabulous. We got a lot of great economic news today. It wasn't just the stock market, also housing starts, an absolute off-the-charts print. And what we've seen now, and look, we all know that I'm not being Pollyanna here. We have a lot of work to do to get back to the heights of the Trump boom that we enjoyed as recently as a few months ago because of what the Chinese Communist Party did to the world, infecting the world and crashing the global economy. But there is so much good news lately that there are really legitimate, data-driven reasons to be really, really optimistic. I know you already mentioned earlier 9 million jobs created in the last 3 months, but on the consumer side, also what we see going on in housing and this housing print today in new home starts, and that's so key because that means construction jobs. But that validates last month we got the largest existing home sales print ever. So the consumers are growing in their confidence, and I think the data tells us firmly that we have a V-shaped recovery right now. That's key. If you contrast that to the Obama years, the slow growth slog of the Obama years.
We lived it.
They were only good for people who were already successful. If you already owned a lot of assets, you got tremendous asset appreciation if you had a bunch of stocks and real estate. For working class people, it was an absolute slog because their wages languished. We see the opposite in Donald Trump. He built the first time, and he's doing it again, an economy that first and foremost rewards workers.
So, Ali, we are of all different generations here, right? You're a little bit younger than Stephen.
I don't know.
So, just in your personal experiences as a young woman who started work during the Obama administration, what has that been like? What have the experiences been like during the Obama years and the Trump years?
Look, I mean, I think you saw a lot of people in my generation, in the few years that we were coming out of school, not be able to find a job, not be able to find good economic opportunity, not be able to see the diversity in the workplace, of being able to just figure out what was right for you and find a career and be able to move and grow forward in that career. I think that was a real problem for my generation. Buying a house, something they weren't even thinking about because the economic opportunities, like you said, weren't there. We're seeing the growth in those places. Also, we saw record job growth and record unemployment numbers for the
record low unemployment.
Low unemployment numbers for the Hispanic community, for almost every different demographic.
Veterans, disabled Americans, record
absolutely.
low unemployment, Hispanic Americans, African Americans, disabled Americans, veterans, everything, and we're getting right back there, aren't we, Steve?
And there's such a paradox here because, again, Obama and Biden and their enablers in the corporate media want us to believe that they are the champions of working class people. But when we look at the record of what they did when they were in power for 8 years, so we have substantial data set there, right? What we actually see is
data set, big phrase. I like that.
Is that they only well, I was on Wall Street for 25 years.
Oh, really? We couldn't tell with the tie in the suit.
Crazy. And but I'll give you a stat. Speaking of data, a stat that is really foreboding about what happened during those years. The top 10% of earners during the 8 Biden-Obama years, the top 10% of earners saw their household wealth increase during those 8 years. The bottom 90% of earners saw their household wealth decrease over those 8 years. It was even worse for black households. Black households, on average, this is according to Fed data, lost 30% of their household wealth during the Obama-Biden years. So their track record is one of rewarding elites and punishing working class people. That's what globalists do. This was, again, the night of the globalists.
Tonight and tomorrow.
And that's what they want to do again if they were to gain power.
Let's dig a little deeper to that, right? What policies caused that? And we know. We've got Beijing Biden. We all have seen the video of Biden clinking glasses with President Xi of China, talking about China is not a threat, while Americans were losing jobs in droves. You've got Barack Obama, who sent almost $1 billion to the Ayatollah of Iran, which is we know is going to terrorists. I mean, these are we have the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a terrible trade deal that the Obama-Biden team perpetrated. What were they thinking? Were they trying to sell America down the river?
These are people who prioritize Davos over Dayton. And they prioritize Shanghai over Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Their priorities.
I love Sheboygan.
Great place.
Sheboygan
brats. Although it's all Packer fans, I'm a Bears fan, but still. But my point is, these kinds of globalists think in those terms. They think in terms of multilateral organizations. I know you mentioned earlier the WTO, the WHO. I mean, the whole alphabet soup, right, of organizations that serve the interest of the plutocrats and the bureaucrats that belong to that organization, but not the member countries, and certainly not working class Americans. We've seen Donald Trump take the exact diametrically opposed tack, and it has worked for our security. If you notice, we're not at war all over the world anymore, and it worked for our prosperity. Then we had this terrible attack from the CCP, but we're going to come back from that. We already are. The green shoots are abounding, and we're going to do it again, the Trump boom 2.0.
No doubt about it. Ali, you notice throughout this discussion tonight, throughout the real Joe Biden, we haven't really talked about, as you know, the convention, because there's not much to talk about.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to change in the next 2 nights, or is it going to continue to be a snooze fest?
No, I mean, I think that they're going to continue to put us to sleep. But, I mean, I think they're doing that on purpose. They don't want you to actually be awake and listening to the policies that they're putting out there. I wouldn't either, right? I mean, if this is the agenda that they're laying out for the American people, you know what? You talked about the forgotten man and woman and this president actually delivering for those people. If those people are listening to what the Democrats are saying, they're not going to like it.
Right.
And so they don't want them listening.
And I have
That's
to
my
almost
theory.
give the Democrats some credit. They're at least smart enough to know that their policies won't sell, so let's not talk about them very
exactly.
much. Right? Instead, they just sow division and attack Donald Trump. Unfortunately, that's really what they're trying to do, and they're trying to hide their actual agenda. Our job is to make sure they can't hide.
Well, Steve, as we wrap up this segment, and then we're going to go on to the next surprise guest who you might be expecting, what is one thing that you are looking forward to seeing in the next 2 nights in terms of really underscoring how far left the Democrats have gone, how radical they are?
Right. Well, again, I think they're going to be very coy about it. I call this the Wizard of Oz convention because there might be a lot of bells and whistles, might look okay on the surface, but you peek behind the curtain and you find a feeble and corrupt man who's trying to be something he's not in Joe Biden. He's no wizard. So I think they'll be careful about what they reveal. But I do believe that there's enough of the AOC Socialist Spice Girl squad wing of the party that will tip its hand about things like, for example, the border. And that's the one place where they seem to be willing to tell us, and again, the contrast versus President Trump today at the border wall, honoring the brave law enforcement that protect our country versus the open borders. They won't use this phrase, but they believe in open borders policies of the Democrats. That's such a clear contrast. The American people need to know that. This president is about protection. They are about open borders, which, again, a hallmark of globalists.
Joe Biden wants to let in 11 million illegal immigrants into this country. Steve, thank you so much. We're going to continue with Senior Advisor Mercedes Schlapp. Before we go, do not forget, text Trump to 88022 and also go to vote.donaldjtrump.com to register to vote on November 3rd. We'll be right back with the real Joe Biden. Epstein, strategic advisor to Trump 2020, with us straight from Fox News.
Oh my gosh, it's so exhausted.
Mercedes
It's the
Schlapp,
longest day.
senior advisor Trump 2020, and back is Ali Pardo, deputy communications director for press on Trump 2020.
Okay.
Don't forget, text Trump to 88022. Mercy, how'd Fox go? What happened? Tell us.
You know, there was a little bit of analysis, but I'm thinking people are watching here tonight, I think more than Fox at this point.
You think so?
No, but Laura
Let's drive
Ingraham
those
was
numbers
great.
up.
Let
Let's
me
get the
tell you,
numbers.
Laura Ingraham was great, and I think the big conversation there is that it was literally like that DNC convention, it was like a bad homecoming party. I don't know what you guys think, but it was like, let's roll out Bill, let's roll out John, Kerry, and they don't talk policy.
No.
It's all about it's like Uncle Joe's a good guy. And that's just not going to cut it when you're going to be president of the United States. You want the president of the United States to going to be like the nice guy,
I know
the
Joe.
good guy?
I used to know Joe, but they don't know Joe because we know the real Joe Biden.
That is
I mean,
absolutely
it
right.
was, to me, again, you know, as we're wrapping up this version, this segment of the real Joe Biden, it was a sad night tonight. I mean, Bill Clinton looked
Wait,
awful.
did he actually realize the moment did Joe Biden realize the moment that he actually became the nominee? Like, he was kind of going like this, going, where am I? Who am I? You know, it was hard to watch.
It was.
But the Celebrate song, Kool and the Gang. I mean, you can't go wrong with Kool and the Gang, don't you think?
It was, the song was
It's a generational thing. Steve
the
said
song-
the same
this
thing.
is-
What's wrong with you, Allie? You're from Miami. We
Yeah.
used to sing, you know, we used to dance for something.
Pitbull probably would have been a little more original.
Yeah,
but
I
I guess-
got it.
Kidding me, both of you? No.
Yeah, that's Pitbull. Yeah, that's what I'm
What
going.
would you have picked?
I mean, I don't know if that's a tough on the spot question. I don't think I have one.
Oh, come on, Allie. You could buy Celia Cruz. Come on.
I could have taken this on.
Okay, that would have been much better.
It was, again, I thought it was a sad night. Bill Clinton looked old and terrible. And then what's Bill Clinton doing at this Democratic convention? Anyway, it's not his party.
Especially when he got a nice massage a
didn't-
couple years ago.
We all
I
saw
don't know
the
about
New
you.
York Post had the pictures.
Yes.
Yeah, so you've got Bill Clinton. You had Sally Yates, who got fired by President Trump for being awful, let's be honest.
She's part of the deep state, people.
Total-
She
do
went
not
after
trust.
our campaign, and it's why the president said, you're out of here.
No doubt about it. And then John Kerry, they sort of rolled out the losers, you know, tonight.
So are we going to call it the loser night? Is that
If you
what-
want to, I mean, I'll go
But I
with
will
it.
tell you, Bill Clinton, the audacity, don't you think, Allie, when he's like, we have to make the Oval Office a command center?
I mean, maybe
Are
that's
you
a
serious?
I think that's like a metaphor. That's like a metaphor. I think Bill was going somewhere with that, and they're, Bill, no. When they
I
were
mean,
doing-
did anyone check the guy's like speech and say, Bill, this might not be a good way to go?
Well,
like,
something we
it's
actually
not helpful.
haven't mentioned yet is that last night's Michelle Obama speech, people noticed that she actually didn't mention somebody. She maybe forgot to mention the African-American woman on the ticket as the vice presidential candidate.
That was
Kamala Harris. You know why she forgot? Tell us.
They taped before she was announced.
They taped it 10 days ago.
Think so?
No.
No,
They
it's
said
fact.
it.
It's fact.
You're kidding.
Yeah,
They said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job, Democrats.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, good
That's
job.
interesting.
Good job, Democrats. Maybe they're already taping whatever they're going to say in
Can I ask
October.
you something? They're like buddies with the Hollywood elites. Can they not get like a really good TV producer to like put on a good show? Don't you think that would
You
be
know-
helpful?
You know what? I've always heard, and it's been true in my experience.
Yeah.
The campaign reflects the candidate.
Okay, got
So
it.
their candidate is diminished, decrepit, messy in the deep, dark basement in Delaware.
A lot of D words.
A lot of D words.
That's
That's what I'm going for here. And that's what this campaign is. It's diminished and decrepit. And that's what tonight was, right?
Absolutely. I think the other thing that you're going to see is, as we start getting into tomorrow with Kamala and with Obama, you're going to see them start shifting to identity politics. The fact
great
that this
point.
president
Great point.
doesn't represent everybody. And I think that's something there to talk about is they've been making a lot of these same promises to the Hispanic community, to the black community for generations. And guess what? It's this president who delivered criminal justice reform. It's this president who delivered results and rolled back the bad policies towards Cuba. It's this president who stood up to, Hugo Chavez in Venezuela.
Maduro.
Maduro, I'm sorry, yes, Maduro in Venezuela.
That's why it's
So I
going
think-
on the same.
Yeah, I mean, they're
They
all
got
the same.
Swords and stuff.
Well, they've gone from one dictator to another. But you're right about that, Allie. And I think that was the real critical point that was made. They kept talking about this man who goes into the Situation Room, Joe Biden, who can make these tough decisions. And the record shows that he can't.
Yeah.
I mean, he was wrong on Iraq. He was wrong on Iran nuclear deal.
He didn't want to kill
He didn't want to
bin
kill
Laden.
Osama bin Laden. And so that's
One of the few
what
things
they're
they got
not
right.
exposing. I mean, they're just not exposing the truth about Joe Biden's lack of leadership when it came to tough foreign policy issues. I mean, we just saw a great deal come from President Trump between Israel and UAE. I know we talked about that yesterday. And here you have Biden saying, I'm going to buddy up with Iran, who is a state sponsor of terrorism. I'm going to buddy up with Raul Castro, who has, when during the Obama-Biden time, we saw more human rights abuses than ever before. This is what a Joe Biden administration would look like. Good guy, bad policy decisions. That's where they're headed towards.
At least they try to make him paint him as a good guy. I actually don't know that. Is he a good guy? Is he just somebody who will do anything to come to power? Something you just said really resonated. You talked about the Israeli-UAE deal. This president, President Trump, I'm proud to be Jewish, President Trump has been the best president for the Jewish people, the state of Israel, in the history of the state of Israel, okay? Today, the Democratic National Convention had Linda Sarsour, an anti-Semite,
yes,
a friend of the terrible, hateful Louis Farrakhan, who's called Jews termites, wants to exterminate us, the Jewish people. They had her at their official event during the day, and they tried to say, well, no, she wasn't really an official event. It had all of their official branding. It was definitely part of their programming. That was the height of hate, the height of liberal, disgusting racism. How could they get away with that?
I mean, they can do whatever they want because they say one thing and no one listens because the liberals, the media, everybody already knows and has decided that they are the anointed one, that they can do no wrong. So they can say anti-Semitic things, they can say racist things, they can get away with it because they've been anointed. And they're not held accountable the same way the
They've
president.
got the
But let's
anti-Semitic
remember,
caucus
so
over
many
there.
members of the squad. I
Right.
mean, exactly. Congresswoman Omar. They all
Rashida
have,
Tlaib.
yeah, exactly. They have made anti-Semitic remarks, and so it's always. And I know you do a great job of reaching out to the Jewish community, our Jewish. We want to keep reaching out to the Jewish voters, saying we're not going to take your vote for granted. And who has been the strongest ally to Israel?
No two ways about it.
I mean, who was the one that said we're going to move the embassy to Jerusalem after decades and decades of these politics with these empty promises?
Right.
And who actually made the move? President
Trump.
Knowing that the critics were saying this can never happen, it's going to cause a war. And what he's been able to accomplish to bring stability to the Middle East, to ensure that our ally Israel stays in a very strong position and putting pressure on Iran, that's because President Trump clearly understands what we need to do to stabilize the Middle East and keep our allies strong.
As we wrap up the night, look forward to day 3.
I
day
know.
4
I was bummed I wasn't here
of
for the beginning.
Well, you're here now.
I know.
We'll save the best for last.
Exactly.
We save
but
the best
you guys
for last.
don't know. I'm actually standing on top of a box because I'm so short. In fact, I was
may or may
called
not be real
a
news.
little person. That was, yes, that's right. Darren made me stand on a box. I'm not kidding you.
I'm not
Okay?
going to
I'm a
confirm
lot
or
shorter
deny
than
that.
people think.
So as we
Just
wrap
letting
up
you know.
tonight and look
box is
forward
about to go viral.
to the socialist meetup tomorrow and Thursday.
Yes.
Question for each of you, and I'll give my answer last. What's the one thing you're looking forward to that is going to be just wacky radical? Allie, you first.
Oh, goodness.
I think that Obama is going to try to tell us that the country was better off when he was president. We know that to not be true. We know that that's not where the American people want to go back to. And I think it's going to be really hard for them to try to flip that around and turn that into a positive for themselves.
I'm just looking forward to the show tomorrow because I think we just have the
Nap time?
best time and nap time after the show. No, obviously all eyes will be on Kamala. I mean, that's really where it's going to lie. So is she going to go out and call Joe Biden a racist, or is she going to take it back?
Is she going to sell the T-shirts? I was that little girl. Is she going to sell the T-shirts
Yeah,
tomorrow?
or is she going to say, I believe Joe Biden's accusers, or is she going to take it back? So there's going to be a lot of flip-flopping here. We got to see where Kamala stands. We know she's an opportunist, and she is someone that we need to keep talking about her record. Most liberal senator in the Senate. She's the one that keeps pushing this, cementing this socialist takeover of the left.
She wants to take away red meat, which you're going to have to pry out of my
meat?
dead, cold hands. I love steak, as you could probably tell. She literally wants to take away red meat. She does.
I mean, look-
It's bad for the environment, she
I
said.
didn't, yeah.
She does. It's
She's
true.
more
The
liberal than
plastic
Bernie
straws.
Sanders.
Are they still selling the plastic straws? Where's
we have
Calvin?
them.
Calvin.
We have them.
To sell the
right.
plastic
I got a bunch
straws.
in
Well-
my drawer.
Good.
We had a fun night.
Yeah.
We're going to have more fun tomorrow. Do not forget, text Trump to 88022. This has been The Real Joe Biden. Tune in tomorrow. Thanks so much. Have a great night.